Okay, we're now starting section 2.2 on rational numbers in our textbook of MathLinks 9. Section 2.2 in my awful handwriting says operations with decimal form rational numbers. So the first two exemplars we're going to do here, the first question says negative 4.38 plus 1.52. It says to estimate and to calculate. So the first thing we're going to do is estimate this. So negative 4.38 plus 1.52 is approximately equal to, that's the equal sign with the dot above it means approximately equal to. And I'm going to round to my greatest place value. So negative 4.38 is going to become negative 4. 1.52 is closer to 2 than it is to 1, so we're going to make that a positive 2. And therefore, a negative 4 plus a positive 2, my estimation, therefore, will be a negative 2. The sum, or adding those two together, should be approximately negative 2. Here's where it gets difficult, the calculation. The calculation of this, if I was to just make this the drawing over here, negative 4 and a positive 2. If I was to think about how did I get the answer to that, what I really asked myself is what do I have more of? What do I have more of, right? And the answer was negatives. The answer was negatives. But when I think about what do I have more of, what that really is asking me is the difference. The difference between the high amount and the low amount, right? The difference between the high and the low. So the difference between the high and the low, what I really did there, believe it or not, in your head, you never thought of this until right now. What does the word difference mean in math? It means subtraction. So what you really did is you subtracted the thing you have the least amount from the thing you have the most amount to get the answer in that estimation of negative 2. So when we actually calculate this as a question, we're going to do the same thing. We're actually going to subtract the thing we have the least amount from the thing we have the most amount. So if we think about here, I have more negatives than I do positives. So therefore, when I do this question, I'm going to take the thing I have more of, in this case negatives. I'm not going to write the negative sign. And I'm going to subtract the amount I have less of, just like this. So we're going to use this basic grade 3 or grade 4 algorithm where we line up our numbers and subtract. 8 take away 2 is 6. 3 take away 5, I can't do it, so I borrow from my 1. That 1 that I borrowed is actually worth 10 tenths, right? 10 tenths. So instead of being 3 tenths, it's now 13 tenths. 13 tenths take away 5 tenths is 8 tenths. Decimal drops down. 3 take away 1 is 2. Now, is that going to be a positive 2 or a negative 2? Right, because this was our negative. I didn't write it, but I know that we have more negatives. So how many more negatives do I have? The calculation for how many more negatives, or the answer is negative 2.86. Now, with the second question, B, it says negative 1.25 take away 3.55. Now, if I think about the estimation, this is going to be a negative 1 take away 4. Right? And people are like, oh, I hate subtractions because I don't do it very often. Is this subtraction sign, what is, that's a subtraction sign. Is that 3.55 positive or negative? Are we subtracting negatives or are we subtracting positives? We're subtracting 3.55 positives from it. So what I really want to think of this question as, it's the same thing would be, and I'm just going to put positive 4 there. Just it's going to be easier if I think of it this way. A negative 1 take away 4 is the same thing as a negative 1 take away just a positive 4. And the reason why I wrote that this way is that we, as intelligent human beings, prefer to add the opposite when we get our answer to the difference between two integers. A negative 4 plus a negative 1. Our estimation, I better put the dot above there, is going to be negative 5 as an estimation, right, when we round those. And a negative 1 take away 4, that still makes sense that it's negative 5, but either way you think of it, you get that answer. So the real question is, how do I get the answer to the question without estimating? Well, you're going to first write down negative 1.25 plus the opposite, which is going to be negative 3.55. And now that I look at that question, am I looking for the difference between positives and negatives when I'm combining them? No. I'm adding together just negatives and negatives. So what operation am I going to use for this? I'm just going to add those two integers together, right? Because they're both negatives. I want to know what the sum of the both amounts of negatives is. So I take my 1.25, I take my 3.55, I line them up. I'm simply going to add them together. 5 plus 5 is 10. 2 plus 5 tenths is 7 tenths, plus 1 is 8 tenths. 1 plus 3 is 4. So my actual calculation is going to be 4.80 or 4.8 negatives. All right, here are 2 questions you can try right now. Press pause. Give these 2 questions a try, and then when you're ready, press unpause and see if the answer is correct. So our first question is the sum of 2 numbers. So we're estimating. Our estimation is going to be negative 4 plus, now I can make this 5 because it's close. 4 negatives and 5 positives means my estimation is going to be a positive 1. Now if I'm thinking about that, I'm looking for the difference between how many more positives I had than negatives, the difference being subtraction. So in order to figure out the difference between them, I'm going to take my positives, which I had more of, subtract my negatives. Now my positions don't line up here. So if you wanted to, because the first one has 2 significant decimal points and the second one has 1, just add an insignificant 0 there. It balances it all out, makes it look pretty, and it makes a little bit more sense. 5 take away 5 is 5. 7 take away 8 can't be done, so you borrow. Make that a 17 tenths instead of 7 tenths. 17 tenths take away 8 tenths is 9 tenths. 3 take away 3 is 0. Is that a positive or negative? That is a positive. So my calculation is positive 0.95, which is very close to my estimation. In the second question, we're asked to estimate. So we're going to make this a negative 4 take away a negative 4. Keep flip change. I got 4 negatives and 4 positives. My estimation is going to be nothing. It's going to be pretty close to 0, right, when I do the actual work here. If I think about what this question would have been with the keep flip change idea, which works for a lot of people, I have 4.1 negatives and 3.7 positives. Now I'm looking for the difference between what I have more of, which in this case is negative. So if I'm looking for the difference, I'm going to use subtraction. The one I have more of, take away the one I have less of. 1 take away 7 doesn't work, so I borrow. 11 take away 7 does. And therefore my answer is 0.4. Is that a positive or negative? Since I had more negatives, my calculation is negative 0.4. Pretty close to nothing.